first official event of the 2015 edition of Quantum Key West Race Week. Panel discussion today to kick things off. We've got from Quantum Sales, Ed Baird. He's going to introduce his panel members. We'll get rolling with this. A reminder to everybody here, the skippers meeting will follow at 5:30. Very brief skippers meeting, and then it will be bar open. So thanks to those who showed up at halftime of this football game. I'm sure more will be trickling in. Look forward to chatting with you over the course of the week.
Thank you, Peter. And everybody, we need to say thanks to Peter for doing that. He worked so hard. He seriously puts a lot of effort into making this event fun for us all. And we do all enjoy it. So thank you, Peter. And thanks for everybody coming here. This is awesome. Sorry about the football game. I'm sure that it's going to get more exciting in the second half. We've got a tremendous amount of talent sitting here in front of you today that are going to talk a little bit about how they approach this week. Now, I'm going to let you figure out the names. You know who these guys are, but closest to me is Nick Turney. Nick was J111 last year, winning that class, and Judd Smith is world class in all kinds of boats that he sails and is consistently winning the teams that he's with down here. Scott Nixon, same deal with Scott works for Quantum Sales and is sailing on various boats. Last year was on a 52. This year you're J1 111 also. Jonathan McKee, Olympic gold medalist and America's Cup sailor, among other things, and done a lot of sailing on all different sizes of boats, from skiffs to massive offshore stuff. And he's also done that transatlantic mini deal where you sail by yourself across the Atlantic in like a 6-foot boat. And so he knows a lot about how to get the most out of what's coming to you in the next little bit on the weather. Terry Hutchinson just announced as our Rolex Yachtsman of the Year this year. Congrats, Terry. And Taylor Canfield on the other end, one of our new generation, younger generation coming into the sport, and Taylor #1 in the world on the World Match Racing Tour, so among other things. So really terrific, and I hope that what you guys will think about is asking them a question or two. But we're going to talk to them just about where they're sailing and what they see is going to be the important thing for their week here at Key West. Now we're going to start on the other end with Taylor. Taylor, tell us, first of all, how many Key Wests have you done? He said lots. I'll translate. So you say you've done lots, but you're only 4, right? Don't touch, just talk. Okay, we're getting there. Now it's you.
All right. Yeah. So, to be honest, I've lost track already. It's, this is obviously a very long week, and I think I've done 4 or 5, maybe 6 Key West now. So, I started off in the Meldish 24 class, and I'm now gone into the J70s. So, just one design guy on Division 2 usually.
Okay, so we're going to ask you about the bigger fleet, because you're going to be sailing in a big group. Terry, you're sailing on a little bigger boat.
Yeah, sailing on Bella Mente, which is a Rolex 72 on Division 1, and I've missed 3 Key West race weeks since 1991.
So that's like 5 times as many as what Taylor has done, but we won't go into that.
Yeah.
Okay. The point is that there's a lot of different ways to approach this week, and it's going to be interesting to hear what these guys are thinking. Jonathan, what are you sailing this week?
Yeah, I'm sailing on Hamachi, which is a J125. We're in Division 1, and sailing IRC and HBO.
And how many boats in your division?
So we have about 10.
And they're different speeds, so you got time handicap?
All different types, so it's going to be an interesting week.
All right. Scott Nixon?
Yeah, I'm sailing a J111 from Pensacola, Florida. My Sharona, we're on Division 3.
How many boats?
We have 7 boats in our class.
7 J111s,
Yep.
all right. Judd, what do you got going this year?
J70 with my daughter and a couple of young guys that can sail the boat well, so we're on that line. Looking forward to a Dave Brennan line.
How many Key West have you done?
Lost count.
Okay. Well, Taylor lost count, so anything over 4 is... So, okay, Nick, what do we got?
So I'm sailing on the J111 Spaceman Spiff on Division 3. Sailed on Spaceman Spiff last year on Division 3. Tricky course over there. It's, I think, my 8th or 9th Key West.
Pretty good. All right, so we got good info from these guys. They've been here enough to understand what's going on. They're seeing what's going to happen this week. But first, before we get to their comments, I want to ask a couple things about you guys. How many people in this group are sailing on course number 1? Okay, so just a couple. That's good. All right. How about course 2? All right. And course 3. Hopefully it's the rest of you. There we go. All right, so we have good representation on the courses that when you go out the channel and you're going to turn left, and then we have a few less people on the other side. But a lot of times what happens on that right-hand side, that westerly side, impacts what's going on the other guys. So, Jonathan, just tell us, from a weather standpoint, this week we're going to see quite a different range of conditions, right?
Yeah, the way I see the week from what I saw today, it's going to be a little bit on the lighter side. So I think it's going to be trickier than normal.
And so, but I mean, is it all the same direction, or what have you got from forecasting?
No, I think we're going to have some southeast and then some northerly and probably some stuff in between. So it used to, when I first started coming down here, it seems like it was always, onshore, big waves, and then the last few years it's been predominantly northerlies.
So, Judd, how do you prepare for the different conditions then? What should we be all thinking about as we see this different forecast each day?
Nothing in particular. You just want to make sure you're good in that, and going to be good in that condition, not afraid to change, gears. But what's unique about the 70, I don't know about the Melges, but is you got to pick a rig setting for that race, and you don't want to get caught outside and have a bad race. There's no throwouts in a big fleet. I mean, the thing that can kill you in a J70 fleet is to have a bad race because you're out of tune, much less going the wrong way or being over at the start.
And that's an interesting thing because Key West is often a little bit unique in the power that the wind has here. In many ways, you'd say that you can see on your wind instruments that it's blowing 15, but it doesn't feel like 15, right? So how do you deal with that on your rig settings?
Well, if it's lighter, and I agree with Jonathan's take on it. If it's lighter, you've got to be careful not to be too tight on everything. And if it's heavier, you've got to be careful not to be loose. It's kind of like the break-off point on the J70 seems to be 12. If you're too loose when it's 15, you're pretty slow. And vice versa, if you're too tight and you're set up for 12 and it drops to 6, it's really slow. So it's a pretty sensitive boat in that respect. You really got to be on top of it. I mean, as a team, everybody on board has got to be thinking of that mode before the 4-minute gun, how you're going to be set up for that race.
And how many boats are in the J70s this year?
At least 50, yeah.
54 and all on one starting line. So pretty exciting stuff. It'd be good fun. But Nick, you have a different situation on your class, smaller group. What's important to, when you look at this forecast, what do you start thinking about to do well?
So our approach going into this event, and the same approach we had last year, was just be conservative. Going into the week, it's going to be really tricky, really shifty, but keeping the team on the conservative side, minimizing your mistakes, staying, if you really are not sure which way the breeze is going to shift, set yourself up back on the race course, stay back in touch with the fleet, just to minimize the losses or potential losses. We spent a lot of time pre-race doing wind shots, head-to-wind shots, tracking, making our chart, so that we can follow a trend if there's a trend happening or not. So we do get out to the course early, do our preparation, spend a lot of time focusing on things like that.
Terry, what are you seeing for uniqueness about this week? What do you see that's different?
Well, I agree with all the weather forecast summaries, and this is the first time for me racing at Key West on a boat as big as Bellamente. The 52 and the far 40s were what I had traditionally been racing, and for us it's a hard race course to the extent that we have one boat that's a bit smaller, but we give a lot of time to, and then we have another 72-footer that we're a click faster in, up above 12 knots, but it's under 12. It's boat for boat, and so if we don't win the first cross with them, and they keep us behind them, we owe them time. So it's hard yards for us. We have to be, all the things in a real big boat, momentum, the slingshot at the start, all these things that you do with 30 tons. you have to make sure you nail. And so a lot of our racing, we put a lot of emphasis to get out on the race course early. We put a lot of emphasis on doing a couple practice time runs on the start because the first 3 minutes of the leg are determined by whether or not you go off the line at 4/10 over target or 6/10 under. And when your target boat speed in 12 knots is 10.5, you have to, there's a lot of timing and there's a lot of choreography that happens on the boat that you have to make sure that you take care of. And then there are other challenges. Under the IRC, we're not allowed to change sails during the day. And so, we have to make big decisions to how many sails we actually carry on the boat. Inevitably you want to be as light as you possibly can, and yet, not get caught out. So with the instability in the weather for the week, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the weather program.
Well, one thing that Terry doesn't have to worry about as much as most of us, in this event anyway, is watching out for the bad air in front of him. Because he's going to be sailing this massive boat that reaches up above everybody else's air anyway and doesn't have to worry about that too much. You got more of an issue with making sure that we all don't get in your way in the pre-start and take out about 6 boats all in one jibe. But Scott Nixon, there's a huge amount of planning and thinking that has to go on in the busier courses like the J70 and the Melvish 24s and things that over the years have had more people on the race course, to watch out for the bad air of the fleet ahead, or to watch out for positioning as you go downwind that you don't get stuck outside a big gang of boats, right? How do you cope with that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ed. We're on Division 3 and we're the first start, I noticed, so at least our first beat is going to be clear air. But the hard part about that is, there's no boats or other fleets to watch and kind of sort out the first shift or see what's happening at the top of the mark there. So for us, the goal is to be conservative and safe, get off the line clean, stay out of trouble. We're a new team, 3rd day into practice, so we're doing a good job getting the sails up and down now. So like Nick said, we just want to be safe and conservative. But as you start doing more laps, if we do 4 or 5 leg courses, I assume the J111s, J88s, some of the other classes, I guess we're the perf class in our division, will get tangled up a little bit. So we have to think, for us it'll be tough because we have to think about boat-on-boat stuff specifically with our one design class, but on the second lap, watch for the smaller boats, make sure we can get the gate clean that we want to, and try to stay out of traffic.
Let me stop you there for a second. Halfway down the run, you start thinking about, how you want to approach the next beat, hopefully, right? And how soon do you plan which side you come into a gate, for instance? A lot of us are going to come in with enough boats around us that we need to pay attention to how we go in and exit the gate. When do you start thinking about that?
Yeah, perfect world. If the gates are set before the start, you can kind of run your numbers to see which gate is favored for the wind direction that the RC posts. So coming downwind, about halfway down, we'll start thinking about the gates, but really not until 15, 20 lengths out, we'll start thinking about the gate. But it's one of those things where, too, if you don't jibe right away and extend on starboard for a while, you're getting closer to probably doing a right gate, right turn at the bottom, and vice versa. If you do a jibe set or get out early on port jibe, you're probably looking at getting a clean gate on the left side.
I'm just interested in a show of hands for the group here. How many of you are thinking about which gate you want to go around before you start the race? Are you putting effort into that, or is it something, okay, I see the smaller boats, bigger fleets, maybe it's a little more, let's see how it plays out, right? Bigger boats and you're setting up trying to go a certain way. So it's interesting to think about. And I'd be interested to know, I'd love to poll the whole fleet sometime and really find out how many boats really even pay attention to the gate at the beginning of the day to see if there's a favored side or to know what that line is. You can make big gains down there if you think about it long enough and get the opportunity. Of course, then you just have to get clean. Jonathan?
Yeah, for me, it's much more driven by which gate can I get around cleanly and get into clear air and start the beat in phase and away from other boats.
Jonathan, while you're talking, how many times do you find that this racing venue requires that you get really far out to one side to make it to be effective? Or is it a play the middle type of a place?
That's a good question. I think in lighter wind, the middle is pretty dangerous, and you have to sort of take your chances a little bit on one side or the other, and I think that's That's true both upwind and downwind. I think if it's decent wind and a northerly, there are some shifts, and sometimes you can make the middle work. But I'm usually tending towards one side or the other.
So you take a bit more risk here than you might somewhere else to get yourself out to one edge. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, there's not that many conditions here that are just straight oscillations. There's usually some geographical or trend factor that's going on. At least that's how it seems to me.
Okay, Taylor down there. How many times you sailed in the easterly here? Can you remember ever doing one?
Hardly ever. Probably, yeah.
And I'd say that most of us that started sailing in the early days of this event spent most of the time sailing in an easterly. It was a different race course. It was choppy. It was, small shifts, and then maybe it banged over to the south a little bit when the wind came in really firmly later in the day. This northerly and northeasterly thing is a much trickier situation. How do you how do you strategize for this wind direction we've had the last couple days and probably tomorrow?
Yeah, just over even the last 2 days, there's been huge shifts. I think we saw, yesterday up to a 20-degree shift at one point. So, there are big shifts, and it is important to play them. But like Jonathan said, it's really important to have a little bit of leverage out to one side, because if you're in the middle, oftentimes both boats will sail, or both boats on both sides of the courses will sail around you. Just with a better shift and with a little bit more leverage. So, I think there is room to do both. Getting out to the side, but playing the shifts on your side, I think, is really important, and especially in the smaller boats when some of the maneuvers aren't that costly, and you can just throw an attack in and only lose oftentimes less than a knot of boat speed in a J70. So, for me, it's definitely more of a tactical game in the northerly.
Well, I just heard some interesting information. Any of you guys that are sailing J70s, you're going to aspire to only lose a knot of boat speed on the tacks, right? Good luck with that, but we're going to keep working. It's interesting to hear how these guys are approaching the day, and it's going to be different. Now, Nick, today there was a lot of current. How much do you pay attention to that? Can you get out of it on one side or the other, or how are we thinking about that? And you're again on which course, so everybody remembers?
So I'm sailing on Division 3, out and around south. So sailing out to the course, or even before that, before we leave the dock, I'll look at a few different tide charts to just kind of get my head wrapped around when the switch is going to happen, how strong the tide's going to be, what the depth change is going to be, and that just kind of gives me an indication of what I need to look for when I get out on the water. Motoring out to the race course, we're looking at the channel markers, we're looking at all the crab pots. There's a million crab pots out there. Those are very good indicators to look at the tide, look at the current, see what the direction is, the velocity of it. And, throughout the whole day, we'll just keep monitoring that. And then once we get close to the switch, you'll find out that it doesn't always switch right when it's supposed to. Like a day like today, when the tide's really strong, it's going to lag. But when it switches, it's going to last a little bit longer before it actually stops and goes slack. And so we're always looking at the crab pots, looking at how the committee boats are sitting on their anchors, things like that, to try to figure out what the tide's going to do.
And do you find that you can get out of it on one side of the course, or is it more that you're just paying attention on ley lines because of what the current's doing?
So on Division 3, if we're sailing in this northerly, like tomorrow it'll be a little bit more north, the channel's going to be on the left side of the course, and it kind of wraps around the south end of the island. So depending on where they set up our top mark, you might see more current up top, closer to that mark, than less current down at the bottom. But in general, from left to right on the race course, it's pretty steady. It's pretty even. When you're going to see the biggest difference is, again, when the tide changes. It's going to flow a lot harder closer to the channel.
And today, I guess the tide probably was going out longer than expected, mainly because of the wash of breeze that came down out of the Gulf of Mexico. Kind of gives a little push on the water flow. And so it's amazing how what's happening in the Gulf affects us right here with the current changes. Some days you get the high tide, low tide, but it always goes the same direction. The current is always going the same way, so we've got to watch for that. Judd, what do you see? Do you pick sides here, or are you playing it up the middle? How are you doing?
I think the 70, if it gets light, is very velocity sensitive. So especially downwind, but even upwind, the lighter it gets, the more velocity sensitive it is. So playing velocity for sure. And obviously before the start, you're looking at wind, you're looking at the forecast, and trying to decide if what you're in is a head or a lift. But more than anything, pressure. Always looking for the pressure. That's what I'm talking to my team about. That's what I want to hear about, pointing at the pressure. And it's hard. I think, we keep talking about it. I think it's harder to read the pressure here on the water than it is in some other venues. I don't know if it's the color of the water is different, but it's a little more challenging to see it. And sometimes the puffs don't, even if there's a puff on the right, it doesn't quite come all the way down. It doesn't quite get to you. So that's a big play downwind. So, if you see pressure downwind, you got to go for it. You cannot kind of mix and match in the middle because you'll be between both pressures. So, especially downwind, but even upwind, I think finding the pressure and getting to it is the key for the 70.
Well, it's probably a really good point that this is one of those venues where you really want to think a little farther ahead than normal. Look out there and get to what you see pressure-wise because it makes a big difference. But what I'm hearing from you guys maybe is not that much worry about the current, only that it's affecting ley lines, but not one side or the other. Do any of you disagree with that? It's all just ley line stuff. So watch the current for that, but not a big feeling anymore. Maybe at the old Stock Island course that was way down there, you might be able to get out of it on one side or the other. But on all the places that we sail now, generally, it's about the same all over the race course, and especially the shiftier it gets, the more you better pay attention to the shifts.
Yeah, I'd say on Division 1, left side's better for current relief. When you get out and there's those flat keys off on the left-hand edge of the race course and there's shallow water over there. But in a 30 wind direction, the right side puts you out closer towards the shipping channel, and it always feels like there's a worse tide out over there. And some of it's probably to do with the left shift induced from the key that seems to always sit out there on the port tack ley line. But inevitably, you'll touch tide earlier on the lower right-hand side or in the middle of the race course as you're heading right. It always just feels like you're touching a little bit more adverse water.
Hey, let's try to change the subject slightly here. Jonathan, can you tell us what, over the years, the number of times that you've done this event, what are the times that on Thursday you think back on the week and say, wow, I'm really glad that I did whatever, or man, I wish I'd had that one situation back on Tuesday because if I'd have been thinking differently, I'd have thought about it differently that day. How does you approach that on long week?
I remember one year we were sailing the Melges 24 and we were OCS in the first race, and that cost us the series. So, that's one that I think back on, and just a dumb mistake, and especially on day one, and especially most classes don't have a throwout. So, I think the management of the risk in situations like the start and fouling and, just trying to avoid the major mistakes is always the things that you look back on. Those are the things that keep you from winning the series.
And this is the long week, not just from on the water sailing, but there's just so much distraction in the evenings that, right, Taylor?
Well, that's a different topic. I'll let Taylor speak to that one.
It's true. There's lots going on. How do you manage that side
That's
of
why
things?
it's a blur the first couple of years.
The first couple of years, that's why you can't remember all of them. Fair enough. But it is a fun. That's Scott Nixon. Tell us, what sort of things are we really trying to avoid for pitfalls early in the week here?
Yeah, well, it's funny when Jonathan mentioned that. Ed, I can think of, was a couple of years ago, we were sailing Melges 32s, and we had a pretty good series going, and the last day we had a shot of winning it, and we were OCS and had to go back versus the Stamla guys. So I think just managing risk, taking it easy. I think those are things you look back at and go, if I just would have held back a little bit more on the starting line, if I didn't push that overlap too hard and get in that situation with that guy, foul out, have to do a 720 inside the zone, or any of those issues. If you can avoid those, it'll go a long way to keep your week consistent. It's a 10-race series, so conservative approach is normally pretty good.
Now, I haven't sailed the J70 here, so maybe you guys that are sailing it and have sailed it can tell me, but it seems like one thing I always remember about Key West is that the courses seem longer than a lot of other venues. Is that a fair assessment? So, the race is a longer race, and that means there's more opportunity to start a little more conservatively and grind your way through the group, right? Is that fair?
I mean, that's a really good point. If the races are longer and you feel confident in your speed, I mean, you're happy to be a little bit more conservative because you think your speed can do some work, keep you out of trouble. And that's when you'll see guys kind of, if they're confident in the side, staying out to the side, avoiding tacks, keeping the tack count down, and staying downwind, keeping your lanes clear, keeping the breeze clear, staying out of the middle of the course as all the boats start going around the course or the snowball starts to happen in the middle of the course. I think it pays off to be safe there.
Judd Smith, where's the best place to start tomorrow?
Well, with this committee, if you're over, they're going to catch you 9 times out of 10. It's probably the best race committee in the U.S. and one of the best race committees in the world. Dave Brennan's team, and these guys are good. You cannot afford to be over at the start, and if you're over, you're going to get caught. So where's the safe place to start? Probably between a quarter of the way down and a quarter of the way up from the pin. Doesn't mean that a group at the pin won't have a break or be able to get a clean start and tack and cross, but to pull that off in a 10-race series every start, it's not going to happen. So you stand a better chance of trying to find a place in the line where it's not too busy, that it's not too far from the favorite end. Always trying to find, that's probably the hardest thing, is find a place that's not too busy. Everybody, especially early on in the regatta, pushes too hard. Like Jonathan talks about that first race. You know, you can tell it's the first race of the regatta because everybody's overeager. They're all down the boat really early. The difference between that and Friday, when no one's even around anymore, you're like, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be doing this all the same. All the races count the same. So you got to treat it the same. And it is a hard discipline and we get to ping the lines, so you got to trust your ping. Either way, you can't get ahead of, people are too close to the line for the most part. And this committee will, if you do that, this committee will catch you.
So we'll be watching the board for those letters tomorrow. Letters in the score in the first half of the week are not that exciting for most folks. I want to try to avoid. Nick, difference in the smaller fleet? Where do you guys like to start?
Yeah, so we got 7 boats in our 111 fleet. And so our approach is, our game plan is always just get off the line clean and have the ability to utilize the first shift. So pre-start, we'll figure out where that first shift is going to be. If it's going to be a right shift, we'll position ourselves kind of away from traffic so that we have an opportunity to tack and take advantage or get into that right shift a little bit more, or vice versa. If we think the lefty is going to come in first, we'll position ourselves to leeward of the fleet, but making sure that we have an option to keep our bow down and able to get to that left side of the race course. So we do a lot of talking. I do a lot of talking with Rob about different modes that we want to be in coming off the line and communicating to the team that, okay, we're going to put ourselves in this position, but we're going to be one of the first boats to tack, that type of thing. So 7 boats, smaller fleets, it's a lot easier to kind of pick where you want to start and make that happen.
I'm going to keep you on that subject for a second because it may be easier to pick where you want to start, but there's probably always another boat that wants to be there too. So how hard do you fight with them?
Never. No, I have a bailout plan, so I'll never, if some guy wants to win the boat end, I'll let him have it. Take it, and I'll bow down, go to lure them. Just want to make sure that we can get off the line as fast as possible, and we can hit full speed at go, and then have the option to use our boat speed and get up the race course.
Probably one of the things that this sport talks about less than it should. And I don't know if you heard what he said, but he likes to have a bailout plan. Pretty good stuff. Terry, you and I have talked a lot about bailout plans. And you're not going to be giving us anything away because your starts this week are going to be easy. You just start wherever you want and sail away from the guys. But what should people be thinking about in a crowded line? How important is it to fight for that perfect end?
Well, Nick's point is really good. You win as many races, if not more, with a really good plan B than you do plan A. And that's something that, as we raced the 52 all last season, we spent as much time talking about what we're going to do when it doesn't go our way, and understanding that you don't necessarily win the regatta or win the race right at the start. So having a mindset that you get to the top mark and 8th if you're in the J70, and then that's the race that you finish 3rd. This regatta is, in my mind, doesn't really start until Thursday. Monday through Wednesday are about survival and keeping it intact and not getting yourself into a situation where you have a a lot of points to make up on Thursday and Friday, and then Thursday and Friday really are the times that you start a little bit more aggressively, start pushing things a little bit harder. And in my mind, what that means is playing the edges harder.
Taylor, starting, what you're thinking this week? Tell me again how many boats in your fleet?
Yeah, so I'm sailing at J70 and
So you got the big fleet.
54 boats. I mean, like Judd said, a lot of the time our goal is to just be able to get off the line and go straight. It's so important. If you start try and start at the favorite end and it goes bad, do the high risk scenario, you end up sometimes winning, sometimes losing. So, being able to go straight and, oftentimes, starting on the side that you want to go to is good, but, that was our goal as well in the Etchells that I sailed this summer, and we just wanted to go straight for, a good portion of the time, and at that point, it almost weeds out, probably at least 50% of the fleet. The guys that, went for the high risk and aren't able to, just use their speed and go in a straight line.
So speak to the person who's having trouble getting off the line in the front row consistently. What is a good plan to get themselves, to give themselves a chance in the race? When they know they're not going to be that best starting team and they may not be able to go straight. What's the plan B? What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, like Judd said, start where it's easier. Look for areas that are not as favored and not as crowded, and just remember that 50% of the guys that are starting on the favorite end are going to be washed out the back, and you're almost going to be ahead of them. That you're fighting for with this race committee. Obviously, like everyone's been saying, it's a great race committee, so the line's going to be relatively square. We would hope, and you're not starting at that unfavored of an end, so. Just start where it's easier, and that's kind of the approach that we're going to take as well. We're going to start where it's easier and just try and go straight and get in phase as quick as we can.
So I'd be interested to see if there's anybody who's got a question. Fire your hands up if there's something you want to ask these guys about. We've been talking a lot about different, the weather situations, the current, the starting. Yes, sir. You're nice and loud for us.
Scott, Nick, you've been out for race course 3 tomorrow morning. Assuming the wind is consistent, I think the side course is better than bid.
So the question is, for Scott and Nick, been out on the race course for the last couple of days. You've seen what's going on. Let's assume that tomorrow we're going out. It's fairly consistent, back and forth on the shifts. Where do you want to be?
So percentage-wise, the numbers will tell you that the left side pays more than the right side, typically on Division 3. There's a lot of geographical shifts that go on. Yeah. So current-wise, like I said, the current is pretty much even left to right on the race course, a little bit more up at the top by the weather mark. So just play that in your ley lines. I mean, it's not really anything favored.
So you don't feel as favored left-hand side shift?
No, you're not going to get relief left or right at the top of the course. It's pretty even.
Scott, you seeing it that way with the current on that course?
Yeah, I mean, Division 3, I haven't sailed up there in a while, but we used to do a lot of Melgis sailing up there, and like these guys said, there's not a lot of current there. Most of the current on these courses comes out of the channels down here, so as we get up there, in the northerly, you'll have, our boat setup will be, we're going to assume it's pretty flat water. It should be flatter as we get to the top of the beat, and then, it has a tendency, the way the Key West bends around is, in a northerly, northeasterly, that top left can be pretty strong. A lot of times you can get top left relief on just waves alone, so it's a little bit, you can go a little bit faster in the flat water than you can down in the bottom in the chop, and then sometimes you can get a little left shift off the top of the key there geographically. So I think protecting the top left would be a safe play. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it would be a safe play for sure tomorrow.
Always good to talk to your competitors between races. How did you know that was going to work, or why did you decide to go that way? And you're just sitting there having a drink between races, and you're looking over at that boat right next to you. Yeah, they like to tell you how they beat you in that race. So why not ask them, right? How did you guys do that? Or at least when you get back on shore. And by the way, we'll just take a small second here to say that these guys up here come and they do this because they want to help the sport be more fun, more interesting, more exciting, and they want it to grow. They love this sport, and they come here tonight and really every night of this event and make themselves available to all of us to talk to, ask questions of, and learn from. And we really appreciate that, guys. It's awesome that you do that. And I hope that what the group of you out here will do is realize that all during the week, these guys are going to be out here talking. And they'd love for you to come and say hi and tell them what kind of boat you're sailing and ask them a question. That's what, makes the day fun. So, right, Taylor? Yes, absolutely. He's the new guy, so. But, please do that, and we will, again, in a moment, thank them. But are there any more questions for these guys? I've got some. Mike, yes, Kenny has a question. Oh, boy. You need a microphone, Ken? Okay, I didn't think so.
Regarding starts, obviously want to get as close to the line as possible without being over early. As such, what do you trust more, your software or your bowman?
Do you go with the ping or the human on the bow?
Any bowman here?
I was gonna say we don't put a guy up on the bow of the J70, so I'll hand it over to a bigger boat.
I find we use the Velocitech Pro Start, and the thing is pretty darn good. If you're careful with the pings, it has very rarely let me down. And the problem with the bow guy, that works great if you're really at one end or the other, but if you're in the middle, just is he really able to discern those couple of meters that make the difference? So, with all respect to the tough job that those guys are doing up in the front, I put a lot of faith in the number.
Yeah, the number's good. Kip Taylor's got something.
Yeah, I think also, I don't know how much it actually matters. One thing we try to do when we're doing the ping is to, if you do have a Velocitech, is to, going relatively slow while you're doing it and making sure that, your boat is positioned correctly, and that seems to make a big difference. And I would agree with Jonathan. It is somewhat reliable, so I think using that is a very good tool.
So guys, all the Velocitech is telling us is where the straight line in the world is on the twins. So it's interesting that because of the software that a lot of the big boats have, especially America's Cup boats and all the really big ones here, that they have software that tells you how much time it is from here to there at the start, and are they on the right angle and all that kind of stuff. We don't have that on most of the boats. We've got the Velocitech that says you are this far behind this straight line. But because we're using it that way, all you're doing is how far behind that line is. You can ping that line from outside the ends. You don't have to do it right next to the committee boat or right next to the pin. You can just be a little beyond either end and get that ping. So you should be able to do that relatively simply without traffic. And as Taylor said, one of the things that's really valuable is to go slowly while you're doing that. Don't be turning and spinning and going 7 or 8 knots and then trying to push the button exactly when you're on the line. Do 2 knots and go straight for the last 3 or 4 lengths. And when you finally get there, push the button. And you'll find that it's a lot more accurate. And Terry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, we use both. I mean, I look at the bowman as part of the equation. And, the computer's one piece of information, the bowman's another piece of information, and then there's just the feel of the helmsman or whoever is helping with the pre-start. So, I'm probably a little bit more old school that way, but, on the smaller boats, obviously, what you're saying, I 100% agree with. But on the bigger boats with the pings and stuff like that, it's reliable, but, there's still human error on either side of it. And so I like I balance the information coming off the bow of the boat as much as I do the information coming off the computer.
Yep, and the bigger the boat, the more the bowman tells you to, it gets a feel for, well, we're approaching too quickly, you're going to have to slow down, and they're telling you that 6, 7 boat lengths away from the line. On a J70, you don't ever get 6 or 7 boat lengths away from the line, right? You're up there, a lot of times you're sitting on the line luffing, maybe even got the jib tucked away, and then all of a sudden you open up and get going. So one thing we do on the 32 is we have a separate person counting down the time for the start and another person talking about how many meters we are off the line. And we find that information is too much for one person to do both things. And somebody just calls and says, it's perfect in the 32 because every 10 meters is a boat length. And so when it says we're 30 meters off the line, the guys can, say, whoa, 3 boat lengths, that's easy. So, but you can call it in meters and just give yourself an idea of whether you're approaching the line too quickly or if it's going to be okay. But very important to get off the line well. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think another thing to bear in mind when you're looking at the relationship between time and distance is what is the shift that you're coming into the line on. Like if you're headed, it takes way longer to eat up those meters than if you're lifted. You'll close at the line much more quickly. So kind of just factor that into your thinking.
Any more questions from the group out here? I think that we got one more. Yes, sir. Oh, there we go. Judd Smith, how many points are you going to finish this week with?
That's hard to say. The lighter the series, the trickier it gets, the points are going to go up pretty quickly. If it was all like last year where you're sailing in 15 to 25 every day out of the north, it's more of a drag race. The top boats are all going to, probably an average of 3 is going to win the regatta. But as soon as it gets light, and the lighter it gets, the points can get high in a hurry. So I think just like Terry says, you're really trying to stay in the game going to the last day. That's what anybody wants to do. That's anybody's game. You can know who the boats are going to be. You can take you can pick the 10 boats that are going to probably be the 10 boats going to the last day, and you're monitoring those boats right from day one, and you're trying to stay in the game. So that's our goal.
All right, Judd says 30 points at the end of the week. Taylor, how many are you going to have? Oh, you said if you could average 30, you'd probably win. I think Judd's trying to win.
Those are tall orders. Yeah, I mean, I think, a good goal is just to try and, pick off as many boats as you can in each race. And, if you can keep it, convert those 30s sometimes into, 15 or so, I think those are the saving races that are going to keep you in the hunt.
And Nick, you got a small fleet. What are you guys looking at?
Yes, with the smaller fleet, that average number gets a little lower. So probably 111's a tight group. I think we're all pretty much going the same speed right now, so it's going to be a tactical race, and everyone's going to have a bad race or two here or there. So I'd say mid-20s would be a good winning number.
Sounds like a winning number to me. So listen, one of the big things that I'm sure these guys are thinking, but they're not saying right now, is that what you don't want is that big number on the first day or two. So if you can just get that nice average and keep your team fighting away and find out where you fit in the pecking order the first couple of days, and then make your goals to just try and do a little better on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you might find that you're in pretty strong as you go into that last race. So listen, Peter Craig's going to come and do his thing for the skippers meeting here shortly, and we're going to call it off with this whole deal. But I do wish that everyone here, 1, says thank you to Peter at some point for all his hard work. 2, has a great time all week. And 3, comes up and, spends a minute to introduce yourself to all these guys and to thank them so much for coming. Guys, it's awesome to have you here. Good luck this week, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.